And you were thinking I should sing this whole presentation?
Flash.
He's savior of the boom, 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 boom. For any of you Queen fans out there, I don't have Freddie Mercury's voice. I am not going to attempt to do that. But I can do Bill Murray talking about Flash Gordon. Gonna have a wonderful time. So, let's actually talk about Flash Gordon. Yay! Brought in a bunch of stuff, which I'll be showing you. Also, there's some stuff up there that I'll be clicking through. And do I want to wear my glasses or do I not want to wear my glasses? I don't know. So, I think for notes, as far as my little things going on here, I'm going to not wear glasses. So, like to start off, people know the characters. They know Superman, they know Batman, they know all the intellectual properties of corporations. And it's really important to know that Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Batman was created by Bob Kane and also Bill Finger. Spider-Man, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. It's not, if not for the people creating these characters and the amazing things they did, there would be no longevity to these characters. It's not the corporations that keep them alive so much as the artists who are creating the stories. So, clap, 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 clap. Oh, cheers, thank you. Sit down, sit down. I want to keep going. So, I want to talk a little bit about Flash Gordon and some of the artists who have worked on it. As far as the slide up there, I'm not sure how much you can see it, so I'm going to actually pass around this as well. This is a gallery page I did for the Flash Gordon comic strip. It shows a number of the artists who have did it, starting with Alex Raymond all through the 20th century. I did this actually the end of 1999, kind of ringing in the 21st century. So now let's talk a little bit about those artists. So first up is Alex Raymond. Now, Alex Raymond, born in 1909, he actually attended Iona Prep on an athletic scholarship. He got a job on Wall Street as an order clerk, and just in time for the stock market crash. So, out of work there, he decided, how can I make money? Well, I'm going to get into the arts, because the arts is always the way to make money. He enrolled in the Grand Central School of Art, and now at this time, syndication was pretty much, newspaper syndication was pretty much based in New York. So you had King Feature Syndicate, which was one of the biggest. It was a Hearst Corporation, Randolph Hearst, which Citizen Kane was based on, which will come up. Because Randolph Hearst was like, I want the best, and I'm going to hire the best for my strips. So, as far as Alex Raymond, he worked on a comic strip. He assisted Rust Westover on Tilly the Toiler. He assisted Chick Young on Blondie. Also, he was the assistant on Tim Tyler's Luck. There was numerous cartoonists living on the East Coast, around Connecticut and stuff, where Alex Raymond lived. So, in that community, he was a phenomenal artist, and he was able to start getting work. So, at the age of 25 is when he actually got his own strip, Flash Gordon. And not only was he doing Flash Gordon, and I put up these are large print. He actually drew larger than this. But these, I want you can, during my lecture, if you want to come up and look at these are the artwork of Alex Raymond. And if you'll notice, on the top of the strip is another strip called Jungle Jim, also drawn by Alex Raymond. And the reason you would have a topper, they were called toppers, and it was a situation where, depending if it was a tabloid strip or a full page strip, they could cut off the top strip, you could format it for different newspapers. So, essentially, he was doing two different strips. He was doing Flash Gordon and Jungle Jim. At the same time he was doing this at age 25, he also started doing the Secret Agent X9 strip. And that was with a writer named Dashiell Hammett. Dashiell Hammett was known for the Maltese Falcon, the Thin Man. Once again, Randolph Hearst, when he wanted a writer, he would hire the best. So you had one of the best pulp fiction writers, detective story writers in the country writing for Secret Agent X9. So he was doing the daily strip, these two strips, all at the same time. Now, Flash Gordon was King Features' answer to a popular strip called Buck Rogers. Secret Agent X9 was King Features' answer to, Dick Tracy was incredibly popular. So they were like, hey, we're gonna have our version of it, and we're gonna have the best artists and writers working on it. So, back in the 30s and 40s, this is before TV, I want to show you, these are actual Sunday pages from the newspaper. This is Prince Valiant by Hal Foster. And you can see how, and once again, you'll be able to come up and look at these, just how big and beautiful these artists would draw their strips. Just spectacular artwork. So, and I'm going to show you a Alex Raymond page from his first year on the strip. Once again, Jungle Jim is the top strip, and Flash Gordon is the bottom one. Now, once again, there's no TV, there's newspaper strips, there's radio, there's movie serials, well, and movies, of course, but these were huge sets. So if you had a popular strip, you were making incredibly good money. It was every city had like more than 2 newspapers. Like today, Minneapolis has the Star Tribune. It used to be every city would have rival papers, and they would sell to different papers, and you would be in a ton of different papers, and you would make a great living doing this. They were like movie stars of the time as far as the comic strip artists. So like Dick Tracy, especially in I believe it's in the 20s and 30s, you have like Al Capone, big crime bosses in Chicago. So you have a strip like Dick Tracy, which is like, hey, here's the common man. In the first story in Dick Tracy, his girlfriend's father gets shot and killed. That's why he decides to become a detective. So it's like a response to all this violent crime that Dick Tracy, the strip, became so popular. And with Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, it's the same with Marvel movies today as far as the superhero adventure. So, like, and also you have to remember too, these strips predate superheroes. Batman and Superman, they were very much influenced by comic strips, actually swiping poses from these famous strips to use in, like the first episode of Batman and the Joker fighting, there's panels swiped from Prince Valiant fighting. Yeah, because they're like, oh, this is incredibly popular, let's do that. So it was a reflection of the times, as the same with movies now, as far as why those strips are so popular. And also, once again, you had the best illustrators in the country doing them. And I mean, you're a 12-year-old kid, you see all these monsters and creatures attacking someone, it's like Jurassic Park. It's very much like, of course you're going to be drawn to that. So so it reflects the times, and once again, they just, as far as the circulation of these strips, just blew up. So incredibly popular. So, he's doing all this work. I showed you the strips. Once again, you have Secret Agent. You can't see the line work really well in that slide, but I want you to just, that's why I have these up. So you can see the beautiful line work that these artists did. So Raymond, I believe, was writing it initially when he first started, but as the strip took off, he then started getting a writer called Don Moore. And so he and Don Moore would collaborate, work up stories, and so he was collaborating with someone writing the stories later on, who would eventually, and I'll get more into that. So, And initially, but like I said, initially I think he was writing it and then hired someone to help him as far as stories. And that's another thing, like the lettering was done by someone else. You would have a staff of people as far as doing the assist, him handling the artwork chores. So, Alex Raymond, once again, 25 when he started Flash Gordon. Now in 41, America enters the war, and now he's married with a couple kids, so he easily could have just stayed out of the war, gotten into deferment, and just worked on the strip. But the patriotic zeal of the time, that just wasn't happening for a lot of people. I mean, Jimmy Stewart, famous movie star, he entered the Air Force, and Alex Raymond joined the Marine Corps at age 35. So he left the writing to Don Moore, and an artist called Austin Briggs ended up drawing it while he was serving overseas. And he was doing like he was doing artwork and such to war bonds and all this stuff and he was also on a carrier in the Pacific. So Austin Briggs took it over. So 32 years old, the war starts. 35, he enters the Marine Corps. Now this is interesting. So Austin Briggs, he's the guy drawing it when he's off, when Raymond is overseas. When the war's over, Raymond comes back and he's thinking, okay, this strip I created, which is so incredibly popular, that's the job I'll come back to. But Austin Briggs was under contract. So Alex Raymond came back to no job after the war. And King Features was like, okay, well, we can't lose the most popular artist of our generation because of this. So they offered him a deal. They said, what we'll do is we'll give you can create your own strip and you'll have more rights to it. And then if it's popular, great. If it's not popular, you can actually go back to Flash Gordon once Austin Briggs' contract is up. So he went on to create a strip called Rip Kirby, which ended up, he won the Reuben Award for Outstanding Cartoonist with this strip, in 1949. But only a few years later, when he was in his 40s, Alex Raymond was tragically killed in an automobile accident. He was visiting an artist, Stan Drake, who was the artist of a strip called Juliet Jones. It was a soap opera strip, very melodramatic, and they were both living in Connecticut, so Raymond came to visit Stan Drake. Stan Drake had a Corvette, and Alex Raymond, who loved sports cars as well, is like, oh, I want to take that out for a spin. So it had been raining, the back roads are kind of slippery. I actually heard this story from Stan Drake himself. He had called King Features. I was in contact with him when I was working at King Features. And this is a very iconic story he has told. He's in the car with Raymond, roads are slip, and Raymond's going about twice the speed limit. It's a sports car. He's just seeing what it can do. The car leaves the road on a turn, and the last thing Stan Drake remembers, there happened to be a pencil on the dashboard. He remembers the pencil floating in midair. That's the last thing Stan Drake remembers, and then he woke up in the hospital because the car hit a tree. Alex Raymond was killed on the scene. So, tragic ending to an incredible cartoonist. So, I focused a lot on Alex Raymond. I want to go more quickly, just some quick vignettes as far as the other artists who worked on Flash Gordon. So after Alex Raymond, I mentioned Austin Briggs. Austin Briggs was an assistant to Alex Raymond. He was working on some of the Sunday pages before when Alex Raymond was working on it. He was actually drawing the daily strip, which Alex Raymond never drew. Austin Briggs drew the daily strip. So when Raymond passed away, it was Austin Briggs who was drawing Flash Gordon. He was born in Minnesota, another Minnesota native who drew Flash Gordon like myself. That makes two of us. So and after Flash Gordon, he went on to create illustrations for books, magazines. He founded the famous Artist School, which is a very well-known artist correspondence course at the time. He retired to Paris, which is very cool, and he died in '73. So after Austin Briggs was Macroboy. So in the 40s, Batman, Superman, all these superhero comics are just cropping up. Macroboy came to fame in the 40s with Green Llama and Captain Marvel Jr., which he also co-created. So he was a great admirer of Raymond. In the spring of '46, King Features hired Raymond to do the Flash Gordon Sunday pages, and he continued to do that. He actually died early too of cancer in '53. After Raboy was Dan Barry. Dan Barry, phenomenal artist, comic book artist, comic strip artist. Early comic books, once again, Airboy, Doc Savage, Blue Bolt, covers for Captain Midnight. What he ended up doing in the early 50s, so Macroboy was doing the Sunday pages, and they wanted to do the daily strip because it had been discontinued. So they got Dan Barry to do the daily strips starting in the 50s. And it became, instead of the Planet Mongo, it became more of a space adventurer. Flash Gordon became someone who traveled in outer space, different planets. He initially worked with a writer named Harvey Kurtzman. Harvey Kurtzman, incredibly well known for EC Comics, Mad Magazine. He did a strip called Little Annie Fanny for Playboy for like 2 decades. But a personality clash ended that collaboration. Writing assistants for Dan Barry would include Harry Harrison, Bob Kanigher, which is Sergeant Rock, Larry Shaw, also Batman co-creator Bill Finger also assisted on some stories. Number of artists, including Frank Frazetta, assisted Dan Barry over the years. One of the artists that assisted Dan Barry, and I have to say that these people who is like being an assist for an artist, it's sometimes you can be ghosting a strip where an artist gets ill or needs assistance and you end up helping them out. It's great for a young cartoonist. It's kind of like an internship, learning the trade. I've done this a number of times with Secret Agent X9. I was initially helping out Craig McIntosh on Sally Forth. So a guy named Bob Fujitani, he worked with Dan Barry, and he actually ended up getting credited for the work during the end of Dan Barry's run, which is just very cool, because a lot of these artists aren't well known.
I got a question for you. So, for assisting artists, and maybe there's a question I had about inkers, illustrator, colorist. Was that all broken apart back then, or were art creative teams?
Do you know, it is funny, because in comic strips, it got to be an assembly line, because it's very much, you have a penciler, then you have an inker, and then you have the letterer and the colorer. For a comic strip, it is more one person. Like, you look at Charles Schultz, who did Peanuts. He did everything, writing, drawing, lettering, coloring. He did the whole job. You have so much more creative control that way. And there's some incredibly great comics that are done with a number of artists, with pencilers and inkers and such. But I think when you have one person doing multiple jobs, they get, I think of like Bill Watterson doing Calvin and Hobbes. It's more true to that one person's vision, and it becomes such a stronger character. And what I mean by stronger, that's kind of dicey, because like I said, there's incredible collaborations in comics that have produced some stellar work. But like Charles Schultz talks about, when he writes it and he draws it. So when he's writing, he's thinking of a gag and he's drawing it out, he can think of how he's thinking of the illustration as well, and he can improve on the gag. Where if you have a writer and an artist, that can kind of, you're not building on it the same way, because the script the writer isn't thinking of it as visually as the artist.
Again, a good point because you have the illustrations, but the tone of the scene, you have color, balance, influence.
Very much so. And like I'm really lucky doing Sally Forth, where if I want to go on a tangent with the art, the writer is okay with it. He's like, hey, I trust you, you trust me, you can just run with it. Which I did a whole killing joke like thing in Sally Forth, which had nothing to do with the strip whatsoever, the gag. But I was like, oh, these visuals are gonna make a cool takeoff of the Killing Joke. So, and once again, Craig McIntosh used to draw it, and so when I took over, Francesco Marciuliano, he's the writer now, and he gives me kind of free rein, which is just, we have a good working relationship that way. So, yeah, so after Dan Barry, he worked on the strip till the 90s. They actually called him up, and I was working on staff at the time, and they said, hey, you're going to take a pay cut because Flash Gordon isn't as many papers anymore. And he pretty much said, yeah, screw you, I quit. Like, it was like, I'm not taking a pay cut. So, and I was there at the time. It was not a comfortable time for the editor as far as that conversation whatsoever. But so, yeah, Dan Barry ended up leaving. It was kind of they had Ralph Reese, who's an exceptional illustrator, started drawing it after that. For whatever reason, he did it about a year and started to get behind on some deadlines. I mean, that happens frequently, no idea what was happening. But Gray Morrow stepped in to fill in the shoes. And so they're looking for different artists at this time. They ended up going with a Buenos Aires studio for Flash Gordon. And that was a hard time because the writing was done in English, it was translated to Spanish, and then sometimes you'd lose something in the drawing. That whole, like when I talked about writer and being an artist, you can get a particular vision of what it should look like. When there's such a separation as far as even the language, we had some really weird stuff happening in the strip where there was just a misunderstanding between the writer and the artist causing multiple problems. So during this time, they were looking for a new artist, and I was on staff coloring it. And I was like, well, I want to draw this. So I took a script, I drew up samples, submitted it to the editor, and they said, no, we do not want you whatsoever. They weren't looking for the staff to do the art. I mean, I was the colorist. They weren't looking to me to do that. So literally like a year later, they were still looking for an artist, and I'm like, well, I'm going to try again. So instead of taking a script that was done at the time, I was like, I'm really going to draw up something that, like, just once again, being a writer and an artist, I can kind of write to my strengths. So I wrote like a 3-page synopsis, a 3-page treatment of Flash Gordon, and submitted that, once again, like a year after I had initially gotten rejected. And not only did I get the job drawing it, but the editor was like, well, would you like to write it as well? And I said, never having written a story in my life, I was like, yes, I can do that. Let's go. So, and once again, it was really fun because I've actually heard Jeff Smith talk about this with Bone. When you're the writer, like he writes this way as well, the way I'm going to just mention, I think of the visuals. I think of the story visually. And so when I'm writing a story, I'm actually drawing thumbnails and such. I'm not writing a script per se. I'll draw these thumbnails and add script to them and change the script accordingly, according to how I switch up the drawing. So, and it was interesting. I was just at Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. Jeff Smith was talking about that with Art Spiegelman. I'm name dropping. Dun, dun, dun. So it was just kind of cool because he was talking about being an artist and how you write something very visually. So those 3 pages I did ended up being the first 3 pages of the first story that I saw print. which is very rare that your samples end up being what ends up in print. Oh, I want to touch base. I'm going to pass these around because once again, you can get an idea of them up there. But okay, so I'm doing Flash Gordon, and I know a bunch of very famous cartoonists because I went to the Kubert School and just I work at King Syndicate, King Feature Syndicate. So I'm thinking I want there's some really great artists out there that I would love to do Flash Gordon. One of them was George Evans. George Evans was known for EC Comics, Aces High. At the time I met him, he was doing Secret Agent Corrigan for King Features. Secret Agent Corrigan used to be called, it's not up here, I'm looking at the wrong strips. It used to be called Secret Agent X9. They now called it Secret Agent Corrigan. So he was drawing that. I had no idea of his prolific career. I just knew I was seeing these really cool originals at King Features. So I contacted him and said, hey, your stuff's really cool. I'm from King Features. And he responded by saying, no one calls me from King Features unless I'm behind on deadline. So I like you. So I started correspondence with him, which turned into a friendship and mentorship. So in Flash Gordon, I thought, okay, I'm going to do a crossover with Flash Gordon and Secret Agent X9. These are two characters Alex Raymond first started doing. And I thought, okay, who better to do the page where they first meet than George Evans, who was doing Secret Agent X9. If you'll notice in the last panel, it's like I told you how I do scripts where I kind of sketch them out visually. So I had sent him my thumbnails and I was like, here, this is what I'm thinking of, you run with it, don't stick with what I do. But the last panel, I don't know if you're familiar with a Chinese director called John Woo. He did The Killers, Hard Target, Hard Boiled was it, right? And okay, phenomenal action films, influenced a bunch of directors. There's a scene where the protagonist and the antagonist they literally switch up their guns. They have the guns in each other's faces. And I thought, okay, that's going to be Flash and X9 in the last panel, because that's just a cool scene. And once again, working visually, building these stories. So I got George Evans to do that page, which was very cool. Next one up, I mentioned I went to the Joe Kubert School. So I called up Joe Kubert, good friend of mine. I kid, he was my teacher and I was scared of him. So I called him up and I said, hey, I can't pay that much because I get paid very little. You get paid depending on circulation. It's a very iconic character, but adventure strips didn't sell like they used to. So I said, I can't pay you that much. Would you be interested in doing a Flash Gordon Sunday page? Now, that's like he grew up as a 10-year-old reading Flash Gordon. Like the three artists, once again, as I mentioned, Hal Foster doing Prince Valiant, Alex Raymond doing Flash Gordon, and Terry and the Pirates done by Milton Caniff. Those were the three artists that guys of Joe Kubert's generation grew up with, inspired with, and loved. So he had three stipulations as far as doing the strip. He said he wanted full control over the project, which I'm like, great. Because he ended up doing the lettering, coloring, everything, which for the little amount I was able to pay him, he did even that much more. So did all that work, and he wanted me to include as many Alex Raymond characters as possible. So once again, on those handouts, I put Prince Thun, the Lion Man, Voltan, the Hawkman, we have Ming, Dale, and then he threw in a really cool looking monster at the end. Next up, John Romita Sr., best known for iconic Spider-Man artist. This is the guy I grew up with Spider-Man. So to call him up was very nerve-wracking. So once again, I had an in because he loved Flash Gordon. Secondly, I had an in because his friend and collaborator, Joe Kubert, had just done a page. So I was like, hey, Joe had done a page. You want to do a page? So he also did a page for me. And what was really cool about this is I did this back in 2002. In 2002, the first Spider-Man movie, Sam Raimi's movie with Tobey Maguire, came out. So I'm on the phone with John Romita, who is an icon to me, and the Spider-Man movie comes up. So John Romita is talking about the Spider-Man movie to me, and I'm like geeking out like you would not believe. So, and then he's like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but what I'm really proud of in that movie is the prominent role of Mary Jane. I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually the artist that introduced Mary Jane in the comic books. And that to me is like, I can't stress how much I was geeking out at the moment. I'm like, yeah, I kind of know that. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I'm talking to John Romita. So that was a very incredibly cool thing to have happen. Last year, I want to show Al Williamson. Al Williamson, long history. He had three stipulations as well. He wanted to draw dinosaurs. I gave him plenty of dinosaurs. He wanted plenty of lead time. And also, now Al Williamson, once again, prolific cartoonist, Easy Comics. He worked on the Star Wars, like when George Lucas wanted someone to do the Star Wars newspaper strip, they got Al Williamson. Like he was the guy for doing this fantasy illustration. So the last stipulation he had for me was that he would not accept payment from me. He had worked for King Features. He knew how little they paid for adventure strips, and he told me, I'm not taking money out of your pocket. So he couldn't have been nicer as far as that's concerned. In a perfect world, Al Williamson would have been doing the Flash Gordon strip. He had done some comic books in the 60s for King Features where he did just the best Flash Gordon comics that were ever drawn. My last strip, I'm going to just jump ahead real quick. My last strip was in 2003. Not sure how clear you can see it, but I have like the rocket ship from the old Flash Gordon serial. The last panel is actually an image from the last scene of the Flash Gordon serial with Flash and Dale. So that was my sign-off. My original sign-off, which was going to be the following week, was Flash having this dream sequence, and I did it with artist Patrick McDonald, who did Mutts. And so Flash is fighting Ming, and it's, at the end, the guy behind the deli counter is like, he saved the universe. So I submitted this, and the editor at King Features said, no, this is not a Flash Gordon strip. We're not going to run it. It's done, like I thought this would be it. So Patrick McDonald said, okay, well, it doesn't work as a Flash Gordon strip. Would it run? Can I use it as a Mutt strip? And they said, oh yeah, it works as a Mutt strip. You can use it as a Mutt strip. So thanks to Patrick McDonald, this strip saw print after the last week of my strip. So 3 cheers for Patrick McDonald on that one. So yeah, so that was my run with Flash Gordon. After Flash Gordon, I did lettering for manga, I did teaching. Freelance, it's like potpourri. You're doing a bunch of different stuff. I eventually got an assistant job with Craig McIntosh with Sally Forth. And when he was looking to retire, he said, listen, they don't know you work on the strip with me. I can give you a good, I can say, hey, he's been working on it, he'd be a good fit, but I still had to jump through the hoops as far as King Features. So what I did was, I did a Sally Forth strip where it's pretty much introducing me to, it's like, hey, who's this Jim Keefe, which Craig McIntosh is talking about? Oh, we used to work on Flash Gordon. Because they knew me as a Flash Gordon artist, not as an artist who did this style. So, and I recommend this to any young artist. really show your strengths. What you want to do to get the job is to show you're the person who's right for the job and it's an easy decision for them. If they're looking for a Superman artist, you don't want to show all your illustrations of your graphic novel of a character they don't even know. You want to show them Superman drawings. So for me, I used to do Flash Gordon. That's not a selling point for doing Sally Forth. So once again, that's how I ended up, and I ended up getting the Sally Forth gig. And also that Sally Forth illustration, that was based on an Al Williamson drawing. It's Al Williamson's drawing from the 1980 Flash Gordon movie. So once again, paying a little homage and also getting the Sally Forth gig. Now, so that's Flash Gordon artists of the 20th century. I want to really give a quick shout out. Now, when I stopped doing Flash Gordon, I was like, who are they going to get to do this? Because I wasn't going to get paid. I wasn't paid that much. Who are they going to do who are they going to get? And they said, well, we're actually going to reprint your strip. Ha ha ha. So, for the next 20 years, my 7 to 8 years of strips were just rerun and rerun. And it's like, okay, what are you doing? So, now there's new comics editors up at King Features. I give them so much credit, because what they did is for Flash's 90th anniversary, which is this year, they got an artist called Dan Schkade. Dan Schkade, like myself, is the writer and artist. I can't stress enough, this guy knows how to draw a fast-paced, action-packed comic strip. You can check out comicskingdom.com to check it out. It's phenomenal work. His style and his writing skill is just perfect for Flash Gordon. I cannot recommend it enough. He actually did this strip for the 90th anniversary, and it was so cool because what he did is he's fighting this villain, realities start to shift, and all of a sudden Flash becomes drawn in the style of Alex Raymond. Then in the lower left, it's the Flash Gordon cereal. Not cereal you would eat, this movie cereal. Then it's the Flash Gordon from the Filmation, Flash Gordon from the 1980s movie, Flash Gordon from a 1990s cartoon. Then he actually included a nice little homage to my stuff, and then back to his stuff as he defeats the villain. He's incredibly creative, incredibly talented. I recommend it very highly. So that's me doing Flash Gordon as far as all the different artists and writers. If you want to find out more, go to jimkeefe.com, and there's tons of stuff there. There's my Patreon, which you can sign up for free or get a membership for more stuff. Has tons of this kind of stuff as far as artwork, tutorials, all that kind of stuff.